I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself for reservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself for reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And the whole world waiting for me to start at the wrong time. But yeah, boo, I got it right that time. Hello, everybody. Welcome. 87, edition 87. I was just musing on that today. I'm getting cross about the ignorance of the electorate at the moment. And 87 edition, when we've had people turn up and give their time, considerable amount of time in their evening. Just at the time, quite frankly, when you look at the ages of the panel, their family need them most, and they turn up and they give informed and clever answers, and they help educate us, me, the chair, and use the listener. And I said hello this evening to Jane, and hello to Stuart, and then poor old Paul said, "Oh, nobody gets excited about me." So that Paul has been to every single one of those 87.
Yeah, I'm boring. I'm always here. You know.
just amazing. Thank you so much, Paul. And then I saw your names coming up, people. Ruth, Jacqueline, Neil, Leanne. How blessed we are to have our listeners as well, and the intelligent and provocative comments they do. Thank you so much. Neil's getting out of patience with me. Okay, let's move on.
I think that's he's organising the chat there.
Oh,
He's saying,
good,
"Come
yes.
on, get your moments of the week in," and that's ideal. That's really good.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Neil.
He's been helpful.
Let's start. Jane, what's your moment of the week?
Do you want your jingle?
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, it'd be sad without it.
That was because Neil got me in a panic and a hassle. Jane, what's your moment of the week?
So it's the research from the lovely people at Amnesty International into the UK housing crisis, and they have discovered in a poll that nearly 1/3 of all adults in the UK are worried that they might be homeless or sofa surfing in the next 5 years. That's nearly 1 in every 3 adults in this country feels that they might be homeless in the next 5 years as a result of unpredictable housing costs, which is just so devastating. I'm not really surprised. I didn't think we'd get here quite this quickly, but it's just so sad.
I think that everybody's right to be scared. Do you?
Yes, I really do. Yeah, I really do. I'm sure there's homeowners in that 1/3 as well. But there's going to be a lot of renters in there, and it's just so precarious renting in this country, terribly expensive. And, you know, your landlord can increase your rent by £1,000 a month if they want to. There's no rules to say that they can't. There's nothing to stop them doing that.
No. Give all our council houses away. Thank you, Jane. God bless. Paul, what's your moment of the week? By contrast, I know what it is, listeners. By contrast.
Mine will have everyone cheering, I'm sure. Banker bonuses hit a new record as average pay down £68 a month in real terms. So bonuses to Fat Cat City bosses have hit a record high, while the rest of us are suffering. In March alone, finance chiefs in London shared £5.9 billion in bonuses as more than 16 million in Britain face poverty and desperation. Now, this is just so so instructive as to how our society works and how our system works, where you've got the people who in 2008 caused this awful thing and never really suffered. They caused the world financial crisis. People lost their jobs, people lost their incomes and what have you. And then they didn't really suffer. They still kept getting bonuses, and now those bonuses are hitting record highs as we're seeing other people in real trouble. And the problem is, it's just the way money works, because money's just an idea. And if your idea is to give all the money to the richest people and make everyone else poorer as a consequence, then that's how it'll run. And that's what our current system is doing. And it's just an incredibly instructive story, that.
Thank you very much. And a signal of what's going on in our society at the moment. Everybody posting theirs. Leanne Powell, congratulations. You find your feet. It's just delight to read that. Thank you so much. And sort of very decent self-indulgence, sort of, we need successful people on the left of politics. Jacqueline, yes, I know. My mother was the same. Read the Daily Mail. It was got all her information from the Daily Mail. Thank goodness you listened to these people. Neil Terry, sort of, yes, she turned up in a ball gown. Somebody else jumped the queue. Who was it? Dominic Raab jumped to the queue. That's the other big news on the queue. Thank you very much, Stuart. What's your moment of the week?
At the weekend, I went to church where my MP was in attendance. Now, I wasn't expecting that, but it was quite an interesting service. The sermon was centered around the idea that even if you were a royalist or weren't a royalist, that the Queen offered something with regards to trustworthiness, honesty, integrity. And that's something that, you know, we can all respect in our own way. And my MP, Paul Howell, nodded along in absolute agreement. And then yesterday went on to support Boris Johnson in the vote of no confidence. So I'm not sure if me and Paul were at the same sermon, but it was an interesting one to see.
Yes. I once went to a sermon where the vicar really told us all off. And it was all on the basis of don't take the mote out of your brother's eye when you've got a dirty great beam in your own. Just sort of stop looking at what's wrong with everybody else and start looking at what's wrong with you. And I walked straight out, and this woman came over to me. She said, well, that was one in the eye for some people, wasn't it? Utterly missed the point of the whole thing. I agree with you, Mark Anderson, sort of the depressing realisation that the monarchy is as popular as ever. It's Stockholm Syndrome. It's quite similar.
Could I come in on that one a little bit? I don't think it looked as popular. I think we saw the pomp and ceremony on the BBC, but I didn't see very many ordinary people doing anything about it. There were some little parties every now and then, but it was, you know, I saw like near my mum and dad's house. They don't live together; they live in separate houses in a similar area. And there was like a little party on the grass out on the street, and it was about 15 people there. In my village, there was a nice thing, but you know, nothing really massive. It wasn't huge.
I think there's a lot of people that enjoyed the holiday as well, didn't they?
It just so happened to be that weekend that they all went out, because you would have done, because it's a bank holiday. And yeah.
Well, we'll wait and see. Yes, Leanne Powell agrees with you. It was quite muted, she thought. Neil Terry Bradford lit a Bunsen burner for the Queen. They lit a beacon for the Queen. I'm sorry. They're going to be the city of culture, for God's sake. Let's move on. What's the big story?
Now it's time for the big story.
To be fair, this did not win people the poll, but the way things happened at the last minute, there was no way we could avoid it. It's the vote of no confidence. And of course, Boris won it, 211 votes to 140 some. Nonetheless, Paul, is Boris toast?
No, I think Boris Johnson will cling on to power for dear life, but this is what this is about. I oft people were asking me, do you think he'll win his vote of no confidence? And it made me take a step back and think, what is the vote of no confidence in? Because the vote of no confidence, or the vote of confidence, whatever it is, I think most people see it as them saying, I have confidence in that man to lead this country. Now, I don't think there's very many people who would honestly say that. And I think the Conservatives, some people who voted for him would be like, they wouldn't trust him to look after the kids for 10 minutes, never mind look after the country. I don't think that's what this vote was about. And I think this is what we always need to understand, because I slipped into this as well. We need to understand that this vote was not about whether or not he's a fit person to lead the country. It's about whether or not they think their jobs, their careers, depend upon him leading their political party. Is he in the position where he'll win them the next election? That's what this vote was about amongst Conservative MPs. It wasn't about his fitness. It was about their perception of what we might think come the next election. And some of them will say, well, I think I'm better off backing him because he's a proven winner. He won last time with a big majority, so they'll be doing that. And then there'll be some people saying, actually, I think my seat's under risk if we keep him. And then there will be others voting honestly here. Like, not every single Conservative Party MP is going to be thinking like this. But I think far too many of them do think like that. So I don't think this was a vote of confidence on Boris Johnson in his abilities as a Prime Minister, because we all know he's an awful Prime Minister. He's absolutely dreadful. I wouldn't be putting him in charge of anything at all. He's got there entirely on privilege and on self-confidence in his own ability.
Given what you were talking about, Paul, about the fact everybody voting for those Tory MPs, many of them voting for their own good, do you think it was important that I felt it was a key moment that he was booed when he went into Westminster Abbey, and consequently a number of letters went in which took it over the 50. Do you think that was a key moment, or do you think there are other factors which have been going on in sort of responsible?
Yeah, I think it was a key moment. I think that was an important thing, because again, it is about perceptions, but it's also about what's best for them as well. So remember what'll be going through these people's heads. A lot of these people have cabinet roles which he's given to them. So a lot of them will be like, they'll be obliged to vote with him. So out of the people who don't have a paid role directly from Boris Johnson, I think the majority, I think it was 2/3 of them voted no confidence in him. So the people who are maybe thinking, does my job depend on this at the next election, are kind of thinking, I'm really worried about this. Then there's add that thing into the mix where they're saying, oh, well, does my job tomorrow depend on this? Does the money that's going into my bank account tomorrow depend on this? Well, I'm going to vote in favour of him because, yes, it does, because he gives me my job. So there's a complex aspect, but this wasn't a referendum on whether Boris Johnson's leadership is fit for the nation. I don't think they care about that. I don't think the majority of MPs care about that. I'm sure some do, but Conservative MPs I'm talking about here. I'm sure some do.
Leanne Powell hits a nail on the head, which I'd like you to think about, because it's sort of both Thatcher and May won their vote, but then within weeks, they had to go because they didn't win it. I mean, sort of Thatcher won quite substantially compared to Boris, and their position becomes unsustainable in government even. I mean, do you think that this is what's going to happen to Boris? Do you think that we can see his position getting more and more unsustainable until eventually the grandees go and visit him and he has to leave? Or do you think that this is a new, different kind of Tory administration who are used to just ploughing on, whether or not they've got any justification?
I think Boris Johnson has shown himself to be an entirely dishonourable person. And Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, you will not find me saying very many nice things about either of them. I think both of them were despicable leaders. I think Theresa May's behaviour with the Windrush generation, with the hostile environment, utterly unforgivable. The way Thatcher treated her own people, treated the miners, treated children, taking the milk off them and things like that with contempt, utter contempt for the working class, absolutely appalling. But both of them had a code of honour. Both of them had, they were working within a system where they think the most important thing is integrity. Their internal moral code was sound. Boris Johnson's internal moral code is whatever is best for me as Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson believes that he should be Prime Minister. He thinks that's what's important. That trumps everything else. So the people of the nation, massively secondary to him. Him being personally successful in being Prime Minister, and I know he'll have a little chart of how many days he's been Prime Minister, because at one point he was going to be the shortest ever Prime Minister. They thought they were going to get rid of him quickly, and then so on. These are the things that will interest him. These are the things, like the milestones of reaching certain people. Can he last longer than... he's already lasted longer than Gordon Brown. Can he reach, the next person on the ladder? Can he... they'll be the things that motivate him, not how highly he's regarded, because he doesn't believe in truth. His former boss who sacked him for lying said that Boris Johnson thinks truth is a very, very subjective thing, therefore it doesn't exist. He doesn't believe in objective truth. So whatever you say, just be, that's whatever. Whatever I said was true there, even if it contradicts what I just said before. He doesn't have the internal moral code that those two have, so I think he'll limp one.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Paul, if I get time. Thank you very much. I noticed Ruth Davison says we can add move on and get on with the job to the bingo card of Tory catchphrases. There was a lovely comment in the Guardian this week, which said, let me get on with the job. Is like Fred West asking to complete his extension.
Oh, God.
Which made me laugh. Jane, let's think about the Tory party. Marina Hyde, the Tory party is devouring itself. Gabby Hinscliffe, we now have a lame duck leader with a party that has lost the plot. Now, what do you think that this decision says about, and particularly what does it mean for the Tory party?
It doesn't mean what I want it to mean. I wish that I thought that those two comments were right. I'd really like to believe that. But the Tories have a way of putting together that I haven't seen in Labour. That their survival instinct as a party seems to be that they might have their differences, and they might be. I know Nadine Dorries has been quite public with some of the things that she said to colleagues, but I think when it comes to it, they'll put on whatever face they need to put on, and they'll vote together to maintain power, weather this storm. And it might well be that they're plotting to get rid of him and put someone else in, who probably won't be much better than him, but can't be much worse. But yeah, it's depressing, but I don't think that this has finished them off. I'd really like to think that this will mean they'll lose the next election, but I personally feel that there's just not a strong enough counter movement at the moment to take advantage of that and for that to be a sure thing.
I mean, would you agree that with the BBC commentators who sort of have, said that once you've come out against Boris, it's impossible to work with him Not because you sort of disagree with him on moral grounds, but because you've just declared yourself an enemy, and now he knows you're an enemy, and that basically we have a parliamentary Conservative Party which is at odds with itself. I mean, surely this must mean something for the way they progress in the future.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, Don, not being very articulate tonight, am I?
You are always articulate, Jane.
I just think he will destroy people who've come out against him, from what I've read about him, with a lot of glee, taking revenge in doing it. But if he feels that he needs them in order to stay in power, I can see him putting on a nice front and swallowing his pride publicly or to their face for as long as he needs to, until he can destroy them and someone else can move in to replace them so that he can maintain his power. That's what I think.
Owen Jones thinks that the Tory party is going to lurch to the right. What Owen Jones says is that in order to shore up his own position, Boris Johnson is going to have to dump all this stuff about ending austerity and levelling up and things like that, and move to be with the right-wing extremists in order to bolster the people who put him in power, quite frankly. I mean, do you see that, or do you think he'll be able to keep on with the policies that he's been pursuing?
He's an opportunist, isn't he? He's already lurched to the right since he took the whip away from all the Tory MPs who voted against him on the Brexit deal. The terrifying legislation that's gone through just shows that there's nothing that he won't do. There's none of our civil liberties that he won't compromise or sacrifice for his own sake. So I think it'll be a case of whichever powerful force he thinks can keep him in place, he'll be happy to go with what they want. And I feel that those powerful people will probably be to the right. So I'm not terribly sure that they were genuinely trying to do anything about austerity anyway. They make a lot of nice noises sometimes, but there's not a lot of substance or logical thinking behind their methodology in doing it.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Jane, as well. Last question to Stuart. Is it good news for the Labour Party that Boris Johnson has won?
I think it's an opportunity. It's one of those things that come and go, one of the events that we all wait for. And certainly it's nice to see that it's communicated in the media that he's a wounded animal, that he's licking his wounds. They're showing a weak and smaller, less boisterous person, that this is an image that might catch on and stick with him for a long time. And I hope it does so. So certainly I think there's opportunity there now to push some actual ideas and policy out that counters this wounded ego, wounded animal persona that he now has for the foreseeable.
So you think it's an opportunity for Labour to capitalise on this?
If it were me, I would have had at least a policy to come out the night that we saw the result, so that while he was receiving terrible news, we were putting forward a really positive vision for our expectations of what our Prime Minister would deliver, rather than what Boris Johnson has failed to deliver.
Thank you very much. What a great idea that would have been. Just returning to all three of you, with just one final question. Paul, what do you make of Jeremy Hunt coming out very publicly against Boris Johnson and saying that there needs to be change?
I think Jeremy Hunt's in a position where he's always had that distance from Boris Johnson, hasn't he? He's a different type of Tory, I suppose, than Boris Johnson. Both of them believe in certain things like making sure that the rich people are well looked after, and as a priority. But Hunt has come out and said a few different things throughout the pandemic. I think lately he's mentioned a few issues that he's got personally with the vaccine program and the way it was done, and the way the safety of that particular vaccine and stuff. So I think Hunt's positioning himself for a challenge, of course. I think everyone knows that. I don't think it's a particularly underhand challenge, given that he's been pretty public about it. The underhand ones that Boris Johnson's probably got to watch out for from people who are close to him.
Neil Terry, did you see that Johnson said that if the Tories keep him, he'll lower taxes?
He'll want to be all things to everyone, won't he? So he'll be saying he's going to lower taxes, but he'll also be keeping promises to like people allegedly like Paul Howell. So he'll say, "Oh, leveling up." But as Jane says, that's a nonsense because nothing's actually happening. Everyone in down south thinks that in those leafy suburbs thinks that the north is having this massive injection of cash, where the reality is entirely different. We're having nothing. But, you know, they'll say those things. So it doesn't matter whether you do the things, it's whether you say the things. But there've been some, like, really, really interesting comments there as well about what might happen to Dehenna Davison, for example. And we actually saw, because she publicly voted against Boris Johnson, we actually saw this before the elections coming up, didn't we, last time? They said if you didn't back his deal publicly, you were out as a candidate. And look what happened. He got rid of people. He got rid of like the likes of Kenneth Clarke. The guy's ruthless. Like, everyone thinks of Boris Johnson as this jovial figure. He's incredibly incompetent, but incredibly ruthless when it comes to his own career and his own ambitions. So yeah, I think she might be on some dodgy ground there, Dehenna. And fair play to her for actually taking the right option and saying, I don't have confidence in this man. Maybe she didn't get the memo that wasn't what the vote was about. But yeah, she seems to have voted with her conscience there, and fair play to her on that one.
Between you and me, I think I get into trouble for saying this, but she's, well, I can't use the word, what is it? I can't.
Cookie.
Shush, you can't say that. I've got to say she's a smooth operator, and I suspect she's weighed up the future and decided where she's going to put her eggs.
I think she's very astute at which way the political wind is blowing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. I think that's a sensible thing to say, but also maybe she's made a decision based upon integrity. You know, the stranger things have happened.
Nonsense. Jacqueline Hemmings. On Sky, they were speculating about Johnson calling a snap election if he won the vote of confidence. What do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, I wouldn't put anything past Boris Johnson in order to keep his seat, but I think that was a threat to stop people from losing the seats. Like, I think that was, if I'm going out, you're going out. So if I lose this, I'll call a snap election, and therefore your seat will be lost. I think that was what that was.
But this says he was going to call it if he won.
If he won. Don't know.
I don't think there's a cat in hell's chance. He would lose the election. He's going to hang on there as long as he can in the hope that he can turn around the public perception of him.
Yeah, I think he'll wait.
He's losing by-elections. He must be scared silly, and that's why so many Tories voted against him. Last question, Paul. Jake Ratcliffe's on interview with the Tory rebel, who said if the Standards Committee find him guilty of intentionally misleading Parliament, they can suspend him for a month. And in fact, they'll get rid of him. So he's not out of the wood yet, is he?
They're not going to do that though. Like, yeah, he's not out of the woods, but I don't think they'll do that. Like, isn't it? The guy who's in charge of that's already had to recuse himself because he's already given an opinion on the case. So, you know, I think they set themselves an incredibly low bar of behaviour, but once they've reached that incredibly low bar, once they've gone under that incredibly low bar, they now seem to be rewriting the rules as to what happens then. I don't see the establishment getting rid of Boris Johnson. He's far too entrenched in it. He's up to his neck in everything. You know, he's got Russian oligarchs in support of him. We saw today Zelensky came out in massive praise of him. saying how brilliant it was that he'd won his vote of confidence and what a brilliant personal ally Boris Johnson is to Ukraine. You know, these things matter to people. These things will make a difference, especially at that establishment level. Things are working out. Like, this might look like a mess to everyone else. Things are working out great for them. Look at Rishi Sunak's personal wealth. Look at the banker bonuses. It's working out perfectly, and they're about to lower taxes for those people as well. This couldn't be working out better for them. It's going fine. They want Johnson in.
Jane, I'm going to talk to you. I talked to Paul about Jeremy Hunt. You mentioned Nadine Dorries. Did you notice the huge gaffe that she made, the huge mistake she made because she was getting so eager to criticise Jeremy Hunt?
Was this where she admitted that the Tory NHS handling prior to the pandemic was horrendous?
Absolutely, yes.
She's made a lot of gaffes, hasn't she, recently?
So, I mean, she's an incredibly stupid woman. Do you think she's a gift for the Labour Party?
I don't know. She's what he needs, isn't she? She's the sort of thing that Johnson needs. Someone who'll smile and say that black is white and tell whatever lies he wants and just put on a face so they can play some videos and get some sound bites out and some headlines, and then people will believe what they've heard and not listen to the facts behind it because they won't know she was not being completely honest. So I'm not sure if she's a gift to Labour or not.
Thank you. And
the
last
Tories
question.
Keep sending her out, don't they? That's instructive as well. They keep sending her out.
Well, she just says the first damn silly thing that comes into her head, doesn't she? Finally, a question for you. I'm not trying to catch you out, but I'm sorry if I do. Did you see? Here's your question, Stuart. To whom did the MP, the pro-Johnson MP, Adam Holloway, try to suggest that the BBC were likening Boris Johnson? Did you see that?
Oh, I saw them saying that they were giving him a hard time and they wouldn't give Boris Johnson a chance to get on and do the job. I don't know.
That's right. And they were likening him. They put a picture of him up, which made him look like Hannibal Lecter.
Ooh.
Do you think that the media have been too cruel to Boris or not cruel enough? How do you think that he's come out in the media?
I think given that the government makes the decisions on what the journalists can and can't do, I think it's something that's completely in their own hands. If they believe that the journalists are too harsh to them, they should have perhaps have treated them better in the past.
I think many people at the BBC are frightened for their jobs, aren't they? Thank you very much, everybody. You are brilliant. But we're going to move on now because we have two more questions to discuss in the last half hour. Paul! Jane, are Britain's police becoming a problem?
They are, and not necessarily in the way that you would first expect that to mean. So this refers to some research done by the BBC, where they put in freedom of information requests and heard back from 22 out of all 43 regional police forces. And they've found out that response times for officers to get to the most serious 999 emergencies have increased by 28% or 3 minutes since 2015. So they've gone up from, I think, 11 to 14 minutes. In 3 minutes, you know, these are the really critical emergency situations, that's absolutely terrifying. And then on the emergency call front, they looked at emergency call response times for the phone to be picked up. Only one police force in the whole country met the target of 90% of emergency calls being picked up in 10 seconds. And one police force, the one that came out worst, Northumbria, 2% of emergency phone calls were picked up within the 10 seconds, only 2%, and
It
one
was,
in
it
every.
was, it was Humberside, Jane, not
Oh,
Northumbria.
sorry, Northumbria.
I don't think Northumbria was very good either.
Thank you, John.
It was Humberside. So, I mean, 2%.
And 1 in 6 taking over a minute to answer the phone. And
these are the real 999 emergencies.
they are. So how many people hang up in that time because they're in some desperate situation, and what happens in that minute? What was really scary was reading that some forces reported that up to 30% of the 999 calls they get involve issues including mental health crises. So that's nearly a third of the phone calls that involve people who've just got into such an absolutely desperate situation. They so desperately need help. Things have escalated so badly because of the lack of support from other areas that the only response is the police. And it made me really angry to read that the government ministers and those in authority have blamed staff working from home for this. What an absolutely ridiculous and offensive thing to say. So, and I think one of the papers indicated that Boris Johnson had made a comment about that as well. And it just made me think, not everyone's got our heads stuck in the fridge eating cheese when we're working at home. This man is disgusting, with a police officer taking 14 minutes to get to someone in an emergency situation. What about the 21,000 police officer roles that were cut between 2009 and 2017? So I know that in Kent alone, because I remember Labour did that calculator, didn't they, in the 2017 election, see how many police officers have been cut from your local force. So on my local force, we'd lost 500 police officers since the Tories came into power. Our local police station here closed, lots of them did. Of course, these things are an absolute direct reason why it would take longer for a police officer to get to you. So to hear these people trying to pass it off as an attack on call handlers working from home just made me very angry. And just to think about people in that sort of situation, where they're, in a mental health crisis, to think of them being manhandled by a frightened police officer, being arrested, being put in a cell, maybe being put in prison when they're at the most vulnerable. It's just disgusting. That's all we've got to offer as a society at the moment because of the ideological austerity that's been driven into all our public services by this government.
People on the comments mentioning Partygate, and Gabby Hinscliffe in The Guardian said that the police had done themselves no favour, quote, tying their reputation to the Prime Minister. I mean, do you believe that the reputation of the force has been damaged by the fact that there were parties going on in Number 10 and that they were stood outside and did nothing about it?
I think it has been further damaged. I think, obviously, the Sarah Everard tragedy and then the way that the people at the vigil were treated, that was a bit of a wake-up call. There's the stupid complaints going in, about police physical and domestic violence against partners. The scale of that is absolutely horrific, and when looking at the absolute lack of competent response from the police management and the those who are supposed to hold them to account, really shone a light on some huge systematic failures within the police force. So I think it has damaged them further, and that's also their way that they've dealt with it, just issuing that one ticket for £50 to a millionaire who lives in the house which has had the most abuses against this particular law, more than any other property in the country, and whilst people on a low income have been given £10,000 fines for the same crime which have ruined their lives. That's not shone a good light on the police at all.
Just one last thing. And I just want to, sort of, you mentioned domestic violence, and I'm just thinking of the case of Michaela Hall, where police stood outside whilst her husband was murdering her. And they've got the recordings on their sort of things saying, well, what right have we got? We have no right to go in. They couldn't hear anything happening, so we can't go in, even though they'd been told that the husband was murdering the wife. I mean, you put that together with Sarah Everard, and you put it together with taking those photographs of Mina Smallman's daughters, and then you put that together with that girl who was strip searched. Talk to me about the problem that the police have with policing women properly.
It seems to me that the problems come from the top. There's obviously some very, there's a huge systematic issue, and actually Chantal Lunt recently did a social ties show for Socialist Think Tank, and it was really interesting listening to her speak as a former police officer who'd gone into the police thinking that she could be part of the positive change to fix these things, ending up at a situation where she just, it seemed to me, decided that it's so rotten through and through that individual police officers can't hope to change it. And it just doesn't seem like the police are being held to account properly. We need a proper independent body who can scrutinise what the police have done. The way that they've treated the protesters from the Sarah Everard vigil. Only this week it was in the news that they're prosecuting some of those for lockdown breaches at the vigil after the complete sham of an investigation into the government and their attempts to avoid even looking into that by saying they don't investigate retrospective crimes, as if they only look into things that might happen in the future. It's an embarrassment, an absolute embarrassment.
I mean, lots of comments here about it. Two things. The first one, I'm going to take Jake Ratcliffe first. Many police officers are good people. You're absolutely correct. My granddaughter's husband is a police officer, and you won't find a finer man in the country. And the police officers with whom I was working when I was a councillor in Newton Aycliffe, you couldn't hope to find more caring, more proactive people than the police who are working in Newton Aycliffe. But I think Jane hits the nail on the head that the system is letting them down as much as the systems, plural, letting them down as much as they're letting us down. There was another thing, though. Ruth Davison backs you up on the need for something independent, some kind of independent accountability. A recent study for the year ending April 2021 showed that only 1% of complaints about the police nationwide were acted upon. 1%, 1 in 100. And yet we have the Sarah Everard chap just getting away with it for so long, not even challenged. Paul, I want to talk to you about institutional racism. There's been a huge row recently about whether the police are institutionally racist or not, particularly Neil Basu being involved in that. I mean, what's your take on all that?
I think the problem is institutions, to be honest. It's not just the police. It's like all these institutions that we pay and we put faith in them and we think they're going to behave in a certain way, and then they're directed to behave in a certain way. Certain people get put in charge of those systems, and then they develop a culture internally, and you've got the same. You can't have a continuation of the same type of people who've always got into those positions for years and years and years, and then expect everything to change. If the same people are running the show, then why would you expect change? So I do think they have huge problems with institutional racism. That doesn't mean, and I think people again get this a little bit wrong, where we're saying every police officer is racist. Of course we are not saying that. What we're saying is the system is set up in such a way that certain people are disadvantaged within that system. And it's not because of the goodness or the kindness of any individual. Individuals are good. Institutions can be massively problematic. If you look to it's not just here, it's not just with black people or with any particular group. We have seen institutional problems in policing for many, many years. Like I think about,
Can
I
I
might come back to that after.
Paul, I'm sorry. I mean, the fact is that a black person is 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched and 5 times more likely to have force used against him. And this is it.
Absolutely, I'm not trying to downplay that at all. By the way,
I absolutely appreciate that. But sort of what they've done is they've got this plan, this race action plan. But the controversy has been caused by the fact that they will not admit to institutional racism. They will not use those words. They will use words like, we're taking racism seriously, but they refuse to accept, and basically there's a strong lobby which says, well, then what's the point of you doing it until you admit that you're institutionally racist in the intelligent way that you interpreted it? Then there's no way forward. Do you think the police ought to accept that they're institutionally racist, as in fact they did in 1999? Or are you happy with them just taking racism seriously?
I think they need to accept it, but the world is built up of people who are following certain structures, and that structure is clearly generating very bad outcomes for certain groups of people based on race, so therefore based on perceived race. Therefore, clearly there is an institutional problem. There is a problem with that institution. If they don't admit to institutional racism, if they don't admit that their systems and their structures and the way they're set up are causing a problem, then saying that you'll take something serious is just a silly thing to say. Oh, I'm going to take that incredibly seriously. Okay, let's move on. What's the point of that? So they absolutely have to address this properly.
Stuart, just very briefly, 2 questions because we are running short of time. Stuart, can we trust the police? That's the key thing. Can we trust the police?
I think you can trust individual police officers. I think, trust it, like all things, has a varying degree of how much you can apply it. Certainly, there are people who don't trust the police whatsoever. Lots of people would, put their lives entirely in their hands. You've got to put some thought into this. You can't just naively consider that every police officer is there to save your life, because as this being pointed out, there's many problems with the system, and there's a risk involved at the moment. Certainly, the public perception is that for the most part, you've got to trust the police. You're told to trust the police, and that's maybe part of the problem with fixing these failures. We get it hammered home into us that we're supposed to trust them. We've got to do as we're told with the police. They have our best interests at heart.
Have you lost me, Paul?
No.
Did you lose anybody?
No.
You all froze. I'm so sorry. I didn't hear.
I answered your question perfectly.
No, thank you. No, I'm
all you needed to know.
I'm sure you. I'm just going to finish off by coming with the final thing to Jane. Do you have confidence for the future in the police force that they're going to address and solve the issues that you've highlighted?
Like we said, I have confidence that there were good police officers within the police force, but it does seem to me like the whole system is so very rotten. I can't see how it can possibly change in any time in the near future.
Thank you very much. God bless you. And our last topic. I'm a bit confused because my computer had you'll have to bear with me, listeners, because my computer had a kind of a glitch, and I've got the 4 screens in front of me, and I actually now can hear what they're saying, but I haven't got anything else, so I don't know what time it is. So I'm going to have to guess. I think we've got about 12 minutes.
It's exactly right.
Stuart, should we extend free school meals?
Short answer, yes. But the reasoning behind it is that currently in England, there's 1.7 million kids receive free school meals. That's part of their entitlement. It's one of the many threads weaved into the kind of welfare state package available. But recent figures have shown, and teachers, unions, and campaign groups have found that 2.6 million kids in England live in households that struggle to access healthy food, or simply skip meals, miss out on meals entirely. So there's 0.9 million kids going without that should be part of this program, but they're denied because how access to free school meals is set up in England. In Wales and Scotland, every child is entitled throughout their lifetime. That's one of the protections there, to ensure that kids get fed, that they have access to food. It's something that I would imagine those countries are deeply proud of. It's it's a real indictment that we don't really look after our kids the same way in England, and it's a very easy thing for our government to tackle. It's not a huge amount of money. It's a very simple thing to deal with. We know exactly how many kids are in school. We know how to provide for them. It's just a refusal to think that they deserve these meals.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, and it's clearly outrageous if children are going hungry. But my question is this perhaps just a proxy for the real problem, which is poverty? And sort of the question is this just a sticking plaster? Is there a deeper problem of child poverty that we need to be addressing, and it might be better to address in the long term?
In certainly the big issue is poverty. That's the key factor. That's the thing that affects all these kids. It's poverty, and it's rife in Britain. The levels of poverty are shocking. In working households is often more so even than non-working households, and we do have to tackle that. But how we tackle that has to be part of a package of sticking plasters. There's many wounds that need to be fixed, and one of the ways that we can do it swiftly to protect these kids now is free school meal coverage. We can ensure that these kids are protected, and then we can look at the next problem alongside that.
Thank you, Stuart. Paul, this is happening at a time when food prices are going up through the roof, and the real question is how are we going to pay for all these extra free school meals when in fact we would be struggling to pay for them anyway? The government's suggestion is we reduce the size of the meal that we give to the children, which is sort of Stuart wants to talk.
I just need to jump in. We've just had a Tory MP tell us that a meal costs 30 pence each. So we don't need to worry. We know exactly how much that this programme would cost. That Tory MP's done the maths for us. Don't worry about that. It costs more to not give them the meal than it does to give them it.
Paul, is there anything you want to add to Stuart's answer to your question?
If you look at the problem, it's a cycle. The issue is a big old cycle where's the money going to come from? It's got to come from the top, because that's where all the money's ending up. But the problem is there's absolutely no desire to take the money from the top, because our system says that they need to make profit. How are they going to make profit? Well, you've got to pay people a certain amount to make sure that we can skim quite a lot off the top. Yeah, but what about these jobs need doing? These are low-paid jobs. And then later on, you'll get in the argument, well, why can't these people afford to pay the families? Well, all they need to do is get a job and work their way out of poverty. And but they're working like more than a full week. They're working 2 jobs and they still don't have enough money. These jobs are too low paid. Well, they're unskilled. So, you need to get yourself a better job. Well, who's going to do that job? No one. The problem is important jobs aren't being paid well. And also, there's a level of dignity. We talk about work quite a lot in this, but there are some people who don't work but do an incredible amount of work around the home. So, a lot of that unpaid work by women and so on. These are these are massive, massive issues that we have with the way our country is set up and the way our system is set up. If you want to continue to make massive profits at the top, then this is going to happen. It's a direct consequence of that. So where's the money going to come from? It's got to come from the billionaires. The billionaires are increasing their wealth 8% a year. Inflation's running at 8% a year. It's not rocket science, is it? Like, what's going on in this country?
So, Paul, is the issue, how is it related to the fact that we outsourced provision of free school meals, school meals some time ago? Or is this a side issue of no importance?
No, it's a very important issue. There are lots of very important issues around this, and this is all to do with an ideology where you've got to squeeze profit out of everything. So the public sector is incredibly squeezed for profit making. So what they will do is they'll say, right, okay, rather than have a group of people who are well paid, working within a school, making good, healthy, nutritious meals for people, what we'll do is we'll get a franchise in, and they'll try and make a profit, and they'll do it like they'll give you they'll make a profit out of them. So rather than make a good, nutritious meal and pay people well, they're going to be skimming profits off that. That's always going to cause a problem. Then they put their prices up because they want to make more profit, and then that costs the school more. So this outsourcing thing is a huge part of the mix that people, again, I could spend probably far too long on this topic, and maybe at one point we need to do a show about outsourcing and how it adversely affects everything. But yes, that is part of the mix, but it's not the only part of it. It's because of the role it plays within capitalism, where they're taking this money out and not giving you good value. Remember those sandwiches that came out during the pandemic, where it was like one slice of bread in it?
Hang on. Neil Terry's remembering during the pandemic when kids on free school meals got a banana and a couple of other bits to last 5 days.
Yeah. Then that was, yeah, look at us, we've done this great job. So I think if they put more money into free school meals, we're going to have a big problem as well because of the system. This is why, yes, it might paper over some cracks for the time being, but the system is the problem again, like we were talking about with the police. It's all systemic.
I mean, you're just so right, Paul. And Neil's agreeing with you as well, Neil Terry. The thing is whenever we want to do good with the buses, with free school meals or anything like this, we've not only got to give the money for the improvements, but we've got to give profits, huge profits, to the people that we're telling to do this for us.
Yeah, and those profits always necessarily go out of the area as well, because it'll be someone from maybe another country or another part of the country, someone who isn't part of your local economy. Like, I'd rather pay a bus driver a little bit more money and have the public sector pay for it, and for it to appear to be more expensive, for it to appear, because they'll spend the money locally, and we need to understand this as part of, as part of our education system. We need to understand how an economy works, how a local economy works. If you give money to a bus driver or to a builder or a teacher or a nurse or whatever, that money's going to get spent locally. If you give it to a billionaire, it's gone. It's out of your area. It'll be spent on a Bentley somewhere, or it'll be kept offshore. And we need to understand the difference between that.
A lovely comment from Jacqueline Hemmings about the problems of people who, after you've paid the mortgage and the interest or the rent, and then your energy bills to pay the profits of the shareholders of the big energy companies, even people on quite a good salary don't have much money for grocery shopping. And some of that has to go on inedible necessities such as soap, washing powder, just horrific. Last question to Jane, and then we'll to whom would you give free school meals? Just explain to us who these free school meals need to go to, in your opinion, Jane.
So I personally would say that all children up to school leaving should be getting free school meals, and I'm really confused at the fact that we always look at this from a cost point of view and don't look at the benefits, because this benefits all of us in so many ways. And you have to think too, some of those children might grow up and be able to create a cure for cancer or solve global warming. They might grow up and be able to do fantastic things if we give them the opportunity to reach their potential. But out of meanness, just because someone shouldn't get something for free, 50 children should starve just so that one person who could have maybe afforded to pay the 30p could have paid for it, but they haven't. So on that basis, we're just going to be selfish and cut our nose off to spite our face.
Just one last thought, and just tell me, Jane, what you think of that. But I was thinking about this. I mean, there was a big scandal a little while ago with supermarkets who were employing people for 16 hours a week, and then we were making up their wages for the supermarkets out of our taxes. And sort of then during the pandemic, we decided that we would pay people out of our taxes. Now we're feeding children out of our taxes. And sort of isn't all of this basically bound down to the fact that people are working 3 jobs and still they're not being paid enough to have a level of income that allows them to keep the house warm and feed their own children? And isn't that the deep evil of our society and our economy at the moment? What do you think? Am I talking rubbish?
No, you're definitely not talking rubbish. There was one parent in Kent they spoke to in one of the articles I read about this study, and she said she's got 3 jobs. She's on universal credit. Her and her husband said, how little are these jobs paying? That she's qualified for universal credit on top. It's an absolute travesty that anyone needs to work 3 jobs, but to work 3 jobs and still be living in poverty like that. And their children don't qualify for the free school meals, so she has to pay £70 every 6 weeks. It's just horrendous. It's beneath us.
There are just so many things, aren't there, Jane, that just need radical change within our society, and we got these bastards in just feathering around. Right, I think I've overrun, and sort of maybe it's good that last sentence will end up on the cutting room floor. Paul, first of all, thank you, everybody. You have been fabulous. Your comments were spot on, and you'll see that I tested the team with your comments frequently through the show, and will intend continue to do so. Thank you to the team for being here. Stuart, you are wonderful as always. God bless you. Thank you so much. Jane, halfway through, Tim Dredge came on and said that you're the most articulate person he's ever met in the whole of his life. Those effects.
Thank you, Tim.
And Paul, our stalwart leader and hero. God bless you. Thank you for being on the show. And I'm going to let you now tidy up and say goodbye. Oh. I'm going to say goodbye from me.
Okay then, just a couple of comments before we go, because there were some absolute stormers that that when you had a computer issue, John, that you might not have seen. Tim reminded me that Diana Davidson had done something terrible as well. Like taken from GBBs, as he calls it, GB News, taking a salary from them while she's an MP. So, she might have been right on this issue, but, let's not forget that she's all about her own career and her own self, like I mentioned earlier on. Kerry Wilkes as well, I think maybe I'll finish on this one. She mentioned about the unpaid work that she does, so she said she doesn't work, but she does loads. Housework, work for Unite Community, voluntary stuff, food parcels, things like that. So again, that's in reference to my mention of unpaid work. A lot of the time, the most important work that is done in a society is unpaid. In fact, if you look historically, that's always been the case, probably because women do it, actually. So we need to be aware of that as well. You can join Socialist Think Tank. You can become a member. Like, share and subscribe to all of our things. Please do that, because it really, really helps us to reach a larger audience. And that is what we need to do. We need to help educate people. Thank you so much for getting involved in tonight's show and all our other shows. And we will be catching up with you all soon. thanks especially to John as well, because isn't John a brilliant host? And he never praises himself, and he's always trying to put himself down and stuff, but we all think he's absolutely outstanding. So we will see you all next time, and it'll be in 88, which has got loads of factors in. Sorry, I'm being a nerd. But yeah, we'll go and we'll have episode 88 next week. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Keep the red flag flying here.